Hello, hello, friends, fam, fiends, foes. Welcome back to my channel where I am extremely happy to welcome back Alexander Moore of Practical Occult. And whether you are here to learn magic from us or whether you are here to prove that magic can't possibly be real, because if it was, then what have you been doing your entire life? We are here to educate and inform you and to encourage you, as always, to do magic about it. And today we are going to have a sweet and spicy debate. What do I mean by that? We are going, well, Alex and I are very dear friends, but we often have opposing viewpoints on similar subjects. But rather than fight with each other about it, which wouldn't be any fun at all, we love to basically throw these viewpoints into a melting pot together and see what useful things we both can learn by engaging with the opposite side. So, the topic we're going to be talking about today is when we are doing magic, we're setting intentions. What percentage is optimal to leave up to that phrase that is so often used, our highest good? How much should we leave to the fates or the forces that are orchestrating these events for us versus how much should we be getting super intentional about our petitions and deciding for ourselves what we want the details of what we call in to look like? So I'm going to be taking the highest good side. Alex, welcome. It is a pleasure to have you back on the show once again. So tell us a little bit, first of all, please. Tell us about your work with Practical Occult for anyone who hasn't yet seen you on my channel before. And then why don't you begin by talking a little bit about your side of our of our spicy debate about why being intentional and specific is your preferred way of going about things.
I'm Alexander Moore. I am one half of Practical Occult. I do the classes, the personal mentorship, the divinations. I have an Instagram at the Hex Doctor, where I burst people's bubbles about misconceptions of magic and post unhinged memes. If Allison, my counterpart, is Practical Occult, I'm Practical Occult After Dark on the internet. It's a little spicy, maybe more than a little spicy sometimes, but I think it's great, and you should too. Uh, in terms of my point on this debate, I think you should be specific. I think you should ask for what you want. You should know what you want, and you shouldn't leave things up too much to other forces. Now, of course, there's a caveat. There will be things you don't think about. There'll be things that you miss that will have to be filled in by circumstance, by the forces you're working with. And I think before I even get on to why I feel like what I feel, the biggest thing is to figure out what you are working with. There are so many people who will do intentions to the universe. Excuse me. And metaphysically speaking, what happens is the nearest spirit to you that feels like taking the offerings of the heat from your candles or your incense or your breath or whatever is going to maybe try to help you to whatever degree that it can. And depending on what it happens to be, that degree may not be great. Um, and a lot of people will, you know, especially, and I always espouse this in all of my stuff. If your training sucks and you aren't good at magic, you lack the ability to be heard by spirits properly. You lack the ability to discern what they are properly. It's kind of a crapshoot, right? So your average person who just like sets a manifestation intention and goes with it. Now, keep in mind, caveat, I'm not saying that manifestation and stuff doesn't work. It does work, provided your technique is good, provided your consistency is good. If you're doing 15 minutes 3 times a day, manifesting for the same thing, that creates a battery of energy that a stronger, bigger spirit, or even like your spirit, can move and start to begin to shape things with. So you can do that.
Yeah,
But also to
how
that,
many people actually do that though, right? There's so many people who are like, I'm manifesting. And then when you ask them like, well, what does that mean to you? They're like, well, I really want it.
right. Or like I'm acting like it's already happened. And again, like unless you're a method actor like Neville Goddard was and you're basically a psychopath, love you, Neville, but Jesus Christ. Uh it's not going to work that way. Now then again, there are methods, the Silva method I always talk about, Joseph Murphy's techniques, even some of Abraham Hicks's stuff. You could definitely pull off some really interesting stuff with, and I've known people who did. but it's all about, discipline, being able to reach an alpha state, blah blah blah. A bit outside of the scope of this conversation, but just as a caveat, like you can. But even then, the most successful of those techniques includes 5 sense level specificity in your visualizations, right? Like, how does it feel to have what you want? And it's also about us, experiencing already having had the thing that you desire, right? The victory that you wanted, the relationship that you want, the job that you want. Like, what is it like? And there are going to be some very specific asks in there. Now, to go back to the whole thing, I educate magicians for a large chunk of my living. I have grown up around more occultists than most people I know. I've seen what happens when people are vague versus specific. Like, I have a battery of data behind this, and when you're vague, depending on what you're talking to, what spirits you're working with, they do their best, in my metaphysical experience, to fill in the gaps. Now, if you have something you can really trust that knows you better than you know yourself, you can argue that that's helpful, but I can also argue that's a lot like asking your grandma to pick your husband. Like,
That's a
I
good
mean,
analogy.
she'll do her best, but you're looking at, in that case, generational differences. In this case, species level differences. Case in point, you summon the Archangel of Venus, and you're like, Anael, baby honey, I need me a lover. And she's like, great. Here are all the wonderful, long-term, wholesome, emotionally stable qualities in a lover possible because it's for your highest good, and I know your highest good. In my opinion, as an archangel of Venus who doesn't see things in human time and see things in geological time, the highest good is for you to have children with this person. So 6 generations later, your descendant can invent a car that flies on water and like flowers and puppy love. And that'd be great.
Might be worth it.
So this person that you do not find physically attractive in any way, shape, or form is the move, and that person's gonna be like, "Fuck, this is terrible. This is the worst thing ever." And you go to that spirit if you're capable of speaking to them and be like, "What the fuck?" And she'll be like, "Well, you said your highest good. This is everyone's highest good. What are you selfish for, you dick?" And you're like, "But I want to be happy." And she's like, "Everyone wants to be happy. I want to be productive."
Let me
So
ask you though, has something like that ever happened to one of your students or
yes.
clients? Like
Yes.
the 6 generations removed,
Yeah,
really?
because when you ask these spirits if you are capable of communicating with them, they will tell you this is what is the best. Now, sometimes they'll be right by saying, like, you've been dating all those drug dealers. That's not good. So we're going to put you in. But again, it's a thing where also magic takes the path of least resistance with every single spirit, every single spell, every manifestation, everything. It's going to go like water. It's going to flow where it is resisted the least and take the form it is the quickest able to take, which is also why specificity is important. Because if you are the kind of person who goes, nothing else will do but that which I desire, and you know that because desire cannot be negotiated. I firmly believe that it can be expanded upon, but the core of what you want is what you want. It inspires you. It is what it is. And if you know what that is, and you're leaving something up to something else's decision and not your own discernment, to me, that says, I don't believe I can have it on one level, but also, I don't believe I should have it. And as I always say to my students, the thing you want is real. It exists in the world. Somebody is going to have it. If you're even making the argument of the greater scheme of things, I could make the argument of what does it matter if you have it then? It should be you. In the scheme of the world, it doesn't matter if you have it or if like Sandra down the street gets it. And fuck that bitch. Like I hate that bitch. And you do too. We all do. So like why do we give a shit about her? Why? What do you stand to gain? So, there's that because also the things we want, there's a finite amount of them. They are not limitless. This idea that there is a limitless wealth in the world, limitless love in the world, limitless beauty in the world is false. Walk down the streets of any major metropolitan city and compare them to photographs of it from like the Art Deco period. There is not limitless beauty. There is less of it in the world. You could see it in the very architecture that psychically influences you. You need to, I would argue, grasp or purchase and bind more things to yourself that make you happy because there is less of it, despite what Instagram illusions might tell you.
That is true. That is true. There are a lot of resources in our society that are being um, often being flaunted in front of our faces or held as certain standards, but which are largely unrealistic to achieve
Mhm.
for many of us who are leading just regular, normal lives. I'm gonna come from the other side, however, and say that in my experience of doing these practices, and maybe this is in some ways unique to me, because I think that prior to my awakening slash repatterning, I was engaged in a lot of behaviors that were not getting me the results that I wanted. And in this moment, when I started to study magic and I started to actually practice it in good faith, which means I wasn't just kind of, trying something here or there or whatever, which means I was actually finally incorporating and implementing magic in my life in such a way as to build a sustainable life from the ground up. I began with a lot of highest good clauses, really for honestly no real better reason than the fact that my initial practices in magic largely came out of chaos magic because it was something that I logically understood as someone who is coming from New York with a background in hypnosis and NLP, and your thoughts will change your reality and things like that. And it didn't require in the beginning my suspending any disbelief to believe that the more extraordinary or supernatural aspects of magic were quote unquote real. Now I've 10 years in, I've definitely I've
Yeah.
definitely had those things proved to me over and over again. But at the time, it made it a lot easier to go into this practice to basically say, all right, I'm going to come at this from a chaos magic perspective, which, if you're not familiar with chaos magic, for those of you listening out there, it's essentially the belief and it's essentially um, the practice of magic in such a way that gets results, that basically says we're going to throw out any rules or dogma or tradition if they are not immediately useful to us. And I certainly was at a point in my life where I needed magic that actually worked. I wasn't interested in studying a ton of old grimoire texts, or like, I was interested in just like, this needs to work for me right now because I need for my life to change. And I felt that if I was getting those results, then that was justifying me having a magic practice to begin with, even when I was someone who had grown up with a lot of gaslighting and just like, it just, when people are like, oh, you're studying magic or whatever, oh, that's so girly. You're like, you believe in that. Oh, it works for you because you believe in it. I still get that like to this day, but now I give way less of a fuck because
Right,
my
right.
magic works for me. And
Mhm.
probably those people are coming over and attacking me. They probably don't have a ton of the stuff going on in their own lives. Maybe they should do magic themselves. And the other component that I was pretty immersed in at the time was New Age spirituality. And that was largely just because I live in Los Angeles. I had just moved to Los Angeles. And I was also involved in some of the communities in like San Diego and Sanitas, et cetera, where there's a lot of like, just a lot of New Age spirituality, a lot of psychedelics, a lot of like Tantra, or sort of that sort of New Age blend of tantra anyway that often gets taught out here on the West Coast. And so much of New Age rhetoric really is all about highest good and oneness and sustainability and love and light work and things like that. And while that community itself may be full of a lot of shadow, because anytime you have these sort of sweeping dogmatic, like, oh, I am full of love and light and I'm not full of any darkness, like, well, yeah, then the minute you do something freaking dark, you're going to feel attacked, and then you're going to, you're not going to examine that for your ego gets so invested in being of the light that you don't actually do that shadow work. Me, on the other hand, I am autistic as fuck, and so I took these things and I applied them quite liberally with chaos magic. So I started launching sigils and doing, honestly, the majority of my practice in the beginning was sigils, candle magic, and like new moon, full moon intentions. And honestly, for the first several years of my practice, mechanically speaking, that was actually all of the magic that I needed to get things going. Because honestly, the real work was knocking out the pillars of my life, of these sort of patterns that I had learned, where I was doing all of these behaviors that actually were not getting me the results that I want because I grew up in a society and I've been conditioned, et cetera, et cetera. So starting out by using that highest good phrasing actually brought me a lot of things that I had sort of, because of my own CPTSD, because of my own patterning, I probably would not have even felt worthy of when I started. So for me, building that as a foundation, saying like, I want, like, man, one of the most powerful sigils I ever cast was simply, I am in the vibration of my soul's fulfillment. Which sounds like all happy and peaceful until a month later, like my eyeballs are melting out of my head with all the information that I'm receiving. But that for me, like that was that I always say all the time, like one of the most powerful prayers ever is, Lord, take from me everything that is not mine and just put me on the path where I belong. Give me the things that are aligned with me, and then let me go from there. And in the beginning, I have to say that served me really well.
Yeah, that would for some people. Although, again, my response is always along the lines of two things. Who are you and like who and where are you in wherever you are? And then what if what you want is not what you are best at? Because that's the thing. I mean, when it comes to your highest good, what I have seen when it works, when a practitioner contacts something that is benevolent towards them and does put them on a path, when you talk to those spirits and you're like, what did you do? Like, walk me through what you would have done. And they'll say, well, I essentially used my own divinatory ability, which is superior to ours because they can essentially just process it faster, and saw a bunch of possible futures for the person. And this is the one that they were mechanically best at, that gave them from the spirit's perspective the best sense of fulfillment, which again, I stress, they do not think like us. That isn't a bad thing, but they don't understand what's best for you in terms of like what would make you happiest, because there's a difference also between what is happiness, what is fulfillment, what is long-lasting joy. Like, it's happiness is, eating junk food, getting drunk, maybe for you. Fulfillment is the results of like going to the gym and eating healthy. True joy might be going to the gym, eating healthy, and like producing, for example, a goth aesthetic that makes you look like a comic book character and feel like a comic book character. All right, using those as just examples. But these other spirits may not be able to process the last one because it doesn't, not only does it not compute to them, but it might seem silly. It might seem trivial to, a small thing to them, a great thing to you. So if you ask, like, take away that which isn't mine, another spicy question is, what if you want something that isn't yours? Magicians throughout history have been like, no, I probably shouldn't have this, but I want this, and I'm gonna have it. And people's morals on that are going to depend on how that's done, what form that takes. But it's also like, I often have to ask, like, do you need to be, quote, the best for the job to have the job? To even be good at the job, to enjoy the job? The answer is clearly no. Be in any industry, and the most talented person is not the most successful. But that
That's
does not mean that the
true.
most successful person is a bad person either. They just know how to be successful at the thing and they wanted it enough. They wanted it more. It's kind of like the most valuable member of a team may not be the best, but they are the ones that want it the most. So, to that end, I still have to be like, you're putting your future in the hands of not you. And and don't get me wrong, personal development, psychic ability training, Tumo and the like, merging with non-dual light, lots of these magical practices that make you more yourself, give you a bird's eye view of reality, are super important so that you can see these things. And one might argue, I would disagree, but one might argue that those things put you more aligned with your higher good. I would argue that they just make you able to see and understand more things. But at the end of the day, you're still you. You're still a creature of want. And the question really does come down to, does your higher good have a limit that vexes you? Do you want more just for yourself? And I'll give a perfect, very real, very spicy example. Your romantic partner does not need to be beautiful, but everybody wants that. Everybody wants to look at that and go, wow, I'm astonished. I didn't know they made them like that. You don't need that because that will fade, that will decay. That is not for your highest good, temporally speaking. That won't last the longitude of your love with this person, hypothetically. That won't be the thing that persists. The small cherished moments, the fact that, much as Yeats said, they can see the pilgrim soul in you, is what lasts. But that isn't what gets you through the door. And if one wants to argue highest good as a continuum of events, then I think it falls apart even more, because then it's like, well, who's to say that I can't fuck with these things, as long as the end result is whatever makes God, the universe, and everybody happy. And then that, to me, creates a flimsy definition for what that is. And so that's one
That's
of my problems with it.
Yeah, that's a great point about what is the upper ceiling of our highest good. And this is also why I think that like I say, my advice, and I know you and I differ on this somewhat, at least on the time period involved, but my advice is always to folks that um to cast magic only on yourself for the first 7 years of your practice. I know you've said maybe a year or two at most, and maybe maybe for someone who is studying more um, technical aspects of magic with someone like you, maybe that would be a more appropriate time period. But I know for me, my life required so much reconstruction when I repatterned that that time was spent not even necessarily practicing and cultivating magic so much as it was spent literally just with like the moving density of changing my life around, creating my course, which by the way, small moment of shameless self-promotion. But for those of you who are listening, the next round of my 8-week course, the Repatterning Project, which will teach you how to give yourself in that chaos magic style those beliefs, thoughts, mindsets, habits, and patterns that are going to set you up for the things that you want to do in life, whether you have specific intentions around them, or you maybe you just know that whatever you're doing right now, it's not making you all that happy, and you want to align with your highest good and find out what that is. This is the pathway to creating a life that you are in love with and giving yourself the internal programming that is going to generate that life. We begin on February 2nd, so do reach out to me if you'd like more information on that. So when I first went through that process for myself, before I went and codified it and put it into a nice, neat 8-week course that other folks can benefit from, I think there would have been a lot of difference in the magic that I did to call in other things, but basically by saying, I want to give myself, like doing that magic on myself first and saying, I want to give myself the patterns that align with my highest good, or I'm basically saying I'm willing to do this work on myself first. You don't have to bring me anything external until I have aligned myself to that which I want, which is also like the twin flame path, which is something else that I talk about quite a bit, is almost kind of in some ways like specifically designed to facilitate, like you get your twin flame and then you're like, oh shit, I'm not at all ready for this relationship, and then you do go through that period of separation where the both of you are experiencing these different sort of karmic events that are going to help you to untangle that patterning so that you can reach that state of inner union of balance, of secure attachment. And then when both parties have done that, then if there is that psychic soul bond between them, then the love between them will just be obvious from that point, and that's when you're in your union or whatnot. And something that I talk about a lot is the idea that we are not the same person throughout our entire lives. We change, we grow, we learn, we adapt. Our set of patterning that we have internally is always growing and shifting and changing. For some of us more than others, depending on how much you tend your neuroplasticity or how much you are content to just fall into the same automated habits, patterns, and programs that you kind of maybe picked up by default. But the more neuroplastic that we allow ourselves to be, the more we allow ourselves ourselves to learn and grow. Then if we cast for something at that point in the timeline and we say my highest good from here where I've done all this work on myself, that might actually be a lot different than highest good when we haven't. So I think it does bear it does bear some mentioning that from my standpoint anyway, doing that work, because also you have plenty of stories of either peers or clients or folks that you've known in Magic who have called in that very specific partner that they wanted, and then that partner shows up and they fumble it because they haven't done the inner work to be that person that is actually going to align with
That
that
is
person.
that does happen. I will say though to that, so it is important, regardless of what a person does, how a person does it, to become the best version of themselves, whether you do magic or not. Like that's I would say honestly a survival skill in the world as it is, because
Absolutely.
we're essentially living in, to put it bluntly, a continually bifurcated world of not just haves and have-nots, but those who are and those who aren't, right? And whether you're looking at like Arden's skill, and Arden's the person who figured out how to rewire a person for fun and profit, to show you who you are, or like, the same amount of time or more of like yogic practices that'll do that. They both give you essentially um, the same end, right? You stand on top of that higher vantage point, and you can see and breathe clearly and understand not just who you are, but how the world is to you. Because, and again, the credit absolutely where it is due. Arden doesn't handhold people through this. I haven't done it, but I have seen, like, I've seen the content and whatnot enough, and talked to Arden enough. Like, she wants you to be right more than you want to be happy, and that is, I think, the crucial thing.
Wait, you
I
got that backwards. I want you to be happy more than I want
right.
you to
No,
want to be
sorry.
right.
Yeah. The way I always see it is I want you to be, I want you to be successful more than you want to be, emotionally attached to it personally. But like, and that way we teach something very similar. You know what I mean? We teach like you want to be, you want to be where you want to be without, regardless of what that really looks like. But I would also argue that once you've reached that point or close to that point, one, it's a practice to remain there, because you can fall back, you can stop using what you learned, and then you wake up and you're doing the same dumb shit you were doing
Yeah.
before.
Not
And
only
that,
that, but the world is evolving as we, so if we
right,
ever get to a point where we're like, oh, I'm good now, well, the world is going to keep growing. So you're
right,
going to have to keep skating to
which,
where the
which
puck is going, to paraphrase
which is
one great.
also another reason why I'm a little bit skeptical of the highest good thing, because the world keeps changing. The world now, and I say this to clients all the time, is entirely different than 6, almost 7 years ago. And I mean to the marrow. Nothing is as it was. The way we interact with each other, the way people operate in the world, the way industries are. I mean, look at Zoom, for example. Like, telecommunications companies, that was reserved for like high-end business and stuff for the most part. And yeah, people use like Skype to talk to their friends and stuff. And I know that dates those of us who use Skype to talk to our international friends for nerd reasons. But
I still
now
remember
it's,
at Epcot in like the Horizons ride or whatever,
yeah,
the person talking to a person in the TV, and we're like, we're like, we're like 5 years old. You're like, that's never gonna happen.
right. Or you'd see on you know, some sci-fi thing where it's like, people would be like video chatting with each other, and you'd think to yourself like, oh, but everyone had to get all put together for that, like with their like handheld like hologram device, and now you got people who are like laying in bed looking fucking goofy in the wrong angle, but like, hey buddy, how you doing? Like, like it's just, it's a strange world. But the point is, it keeps changing. And if we already cannot expect the spirits or forces that we contact to parse what actually matters to us on a visceral level, how can we expect them to do that when things keep changing faster and more rapidly than they ever have? Because that's all well and good. But a thing that I find that people are reaching in Magic is a level of scarcity of the thing you want isn't fucking real.
Mm.
Or worse, it's so vanishingly rare that it doesn't want you back. Like, yeah, people have fumbled that, and people fumble that because they aren't the thing wants, and they're not going to be out here using compulsory love magic, which is real and does work. And there are reasons why it's ineffective despite being effective. It's a bad choice today, and I teach all about that in classes that I put out. and the actual way to do this successfully that doesn't fail. Many satisfied customers who are personally getting laid and getting paid as we speak. But point is, the world changes, and to put that on the hands of these things, whether they are angels or what people might call ascended masters or like lineage holders or like spirits that govern and protect whatever tradition that you're in, or even like your ancestral line in certain traditions, whatever you're putting your hands in, or whatever you're putting your fate in the hands of, maybe they get it, maybe they don't, because these things also have intelligence and opinions and goals, and also they have agendas, whether we like to believe that or not. They have their own desires for how things go. None of these things are truly universally benevolent, just like we are not truly universally benevolent. So the question I always ask people is, how much do you want to be in the driver's seat of things? How much do you trust yourself to know? And again, it takes time. I will say there are people I have known in magic and in spirituality who have put their entire life in the hands of various spiritual forces and who seem to me to be genuinely happy, but they do not seem to me to be genuinely in control. They have surrendered to that. And there are people, and I don't mean that necessarily negatively, but they have. And there are a whole bunches of reasons why you might. Genuinely, let's say your life was full of terror, like abject horror and awful shit, and you find a spiritual path that actually works for you, and you're like, fuck it, just make me happy. I just want to be happy. And I've seen that. And again, truly, from the bottom of my heart, no shade to those individual people. If it's the shelter from the storm that's been your whole life, I can't imagine. But if you're not in that situation, I would argue that making your choices, knowing what's good for you, is crucial. You need to be able to look at your life and go, this is what I want. This is why I want what I want. And I'm talking about the good and the bad. Like, you need to sit down with at least just yourself and be like, all right, why do I want to be wealthy? Why do I want? And again, I remember the first time I ever heard an honest answer from a student. I was like, why do you want to be wealthy? And she's like, I like nice shit and I like to feel better than poor people. And this woman is like a sweetheart. She's a wonderful person. And when she said that, I was floored. I was like, oh, and she goes, yeah, I know it's not the greatest thing in the world, but you asked and I answered. And she's like, yeah, I wrestle
Important
with
to
that.
be in touch with our shadow side.
She said, I wrestle with that, da da da, but I still want it. And I'm like, okay, well, shit. And she's currently an eight-figure, person. So she got what she wanted. She crushed it. But to know these things and then to look at that in the strata of what I want, what I know what I want versus my highest good, I don't know that they're compatible just based on what I've seen. Because most people who are operating from the my highest good are not starting operating from their highest level of self or self-awareness either. I would argue that, much like, to be blunt, manifestation tech works better for physically attractive people because they are better able to happily see themselves in that sort of thing, which is also why the Silva method works, is to put you in alpha, which bypasses the I don't like the way I look thing, and you can actually do stuff. So if you're fat and you want to manifest, Silva method. I'm just saying, it is what it is. And if you want it to work, Jose Silva was a big guy, and he crushed that shit. He was psychic as fuck. So I'm just saying, my man knew. But what was I saying? Besides being hilarious and awesome, and correct at all times. God, this could be
You
me.
actually said something I'd love to expand on if
Go
you
for it.
yeah. So one of the things that you brought up is first of all, you were talking about uh we're talking about those practices that allow you to see from a higher
Mhm,
vantage point, right? And you were
mhm.
saying that if you haven't done that work, you might not know what your highest good is, you might not trust your spirits to know, etc. But you were also talking about how well, for those of us with CPTSD, right? I was someone, for example, who had a lot of toxic patterning, who was also growing up undiagnosed autistic, undiagnosed ADHD. I also had a lot of gaslighting and a lot of sort of that like undiagnosed autistic femme naivete about like, oh, it must be internalizing it, right? Oh, it must be me. I lost these friends. I must be a bad
Mm.
person or whatever. I must be whatever. And you grow up and you realize that like, as the poem goes, roses are red, violets are blue. It don't always be like that, but sometimes it do.
Yeah.
And so there are times when I've been able to look, because you never want to be that person. I didn't anyway, who's like, oh, those people are just jealous of my shine or whatever.
Mm.
Looking back now and recognizing myself as someone witch-blooded, as someone autistic who maybe did have these sort of different means of perception that were insightful and intuitive, but maybe weren't attuned to everyone else. I think that in a lot of those situations where I encountered whether it was outright abuse or whether it was just like mistreatment or maltreatment by like friend groups I had or whatever, or romantic rejection for all the reasons that I experienced romantic rejection, which actually looking back really had nothing to do with my being unworthy, but rather like just with my being different in ways that I think were confronting to the kinds of people that I was interested in. For me, I think that anything I would have manifested for myself, even if I had known the tech, would have come from these limiting kind of patterns, would have
Mm.
come from these sort of like, I think as my magic has gotten better and better, and actually like meeting you has been, as you know, as I've told you many times already, has really allowed me to see myself and my abilities in an entirely new light of worthiness in many ways, coming from this sort of pattern of humility or like, well, it can't be just because I'm great or whatever. Like I must be doing something to these people, or I must be the one who's messed up, or I must be wrong about things, or somehow, and always constantly doubting myself. Having that attunement to my highest good in the beginning of my magic practice was something that really did lift and elevate my life in many ways. And I think that my argument for doing this is actually like you might look at me and say, well, sure, Arden, but you had complex PTSD and you were underestimating yourself. And so, yeah, sure, maybe there were some spirits who came along who did see that you had extraordinary potential and put you on this path. So maybe it worked for you. But my argument is going to be that in the society we live in, because we live in a society, there are
Check.
so many of us with complex trauma. There are more and more neurodivergent people, for example, being diagnosed all the time, and self-diagnosing as well, because even the mental health industrial complex cannot keep up with the lived experience community and what we are all sharing with each other online about how we work and how we interface, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be a ton of people out there like me who have been traumatized by society, who are growing up with those societal patterns that have maybe informed the way that their parents raised them, even if their parents were doing their best or whatever. There's plenty of there's plenty of shitty and abusive parents in our previous generation as well. There's plenty of trauma that has been passed down. So I would actually make the argument that cases like mine are probably not as rare as we may think. I think there are a lot of people out there who may be underestimating themselves and who, when they do start a magic practice, are going to find that they've had actually a lot of gifts, or they've been more right about the world than they thought they were, but they never would have been able to access that without asking for their highest good, because otherwise they would have still been setting their intentions or manifesting, even if they learn the tech correctly, the things they would have chosen to manifest would have still been in alignment with that smaller version of themselves. And as Carl Jung says, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots have reached down to hell. So for many of us who do have those backgrounds and those pasts that are steeped in histories of a lot of darkness, those of us who did grow up with complex PTSD and maybe even were late diagnosed or not diagnosed at all until later in life, I think there's a lot of us out there who we our roots have reached to hell, and it's hard to manifest from that place, and it's hard to dream as big as we can. So by aligning with our highest good, we may end up being set on the path to heaven in ways that we don't even necessarily, we're not even able to anticipate from that vantage point.
Maybe. However, um, I would argue that while people like you're describing are certainly very real, they still make up a percentage of people in esoterica writ large. Not everybody came from a really bad place that demotivated them critically. And I would argue that everybody has had some measure of that. And I've had students like that. My response is not the most easy to swallow response, but it's simply this: every problem comes from frailty. Weakness is a choice. You don't have to stay weak. You can always be better. You can always grow and heal yourself. If putting your hands or putting your fate in the hands of a spirit for your highest good heals you, and there are examples of this, people be like, I took a patronage with Saint Michael, or I, took a medicine Buddha empowerment and I did this thing, or, my Orisha. And I don't know much about specific Orishas, so like forgive me, all Santeros and other Orisha people out there, whatever. The one you get, the head Orisha, not the voodoo head spirit, but you guys know what I mean. You guys know what I mean. That thing, it's like, yeah, and it guided me. But I would argue that there's still a difference between having a guiding spirit and fully putting your faith in that. Because the thing I worry about with people who have been maligned through no fault of their own is this sense of helplessness that is easy to default to when you've been hurt a lot. And again, I'm not denigrating these people's experience.
No, this is real. Like learned help.
Yeah,
That's in week one lecture of the repatterning project. We learn about learned helplessness because we need to be able to see when we're doing that. So no, I'm on
right.
board with what you're saying.
So when I say things like weakness is a choice and strength, growing strength solves every problem in an individual. I mean it, but I don't mean it's easy. I don't mean it's fun, and I don't mean it's fair.
It's
None
hard
of
to
these things are,
see too.
yeah,
Like that's
none
the
of these
thing about
things,
learned
yeah.
helplessness is that like I'm sure you know that study of where like they put the dogs in the cages and they shock the dog while it's in the locked cage. If you shock the dog while it's in a cage and the door is open, the dog will run out. But if you put a dog
Mhm.
in a locked cage and you shock it a number of times and then you open that door and you shock it again, that dog doesn't because it's
Mhm.
learned quite literally that helplessness. It stays in the cage. It doesn't even realize the door is open. And it was actually only when I learned about that, that I saw for myself where I had been choosing the same things out of these unconscious learnings and habits. So if you had said that to me, it's not, I don't disagree with you because I think it is our responsibility to repattern. But if we don't have those resources and we can't see it, I think if I had heard like, oh, you need to be strong, you need to train yourself out of your weakness. If I had heard that in my old state, I might have even believed you. But I think what I would have done is I would have interpreted that as like having to desensitize myself even more, having to grit it out even more, having to withstand all of these traumas that I
Mhm.
had to withstand for so long. So even as you're correct, I would have misinterpreted it from that place.
Sure. But what I mean in general is like if you are trying to become stronger yourself versus if you go, I just need, and again, there's nothing wrong with saying, I just need a break. Just take me this far. Again, provided the spirits you're working with are trustworthy, which is a whole other thing, but provided they are, take me this far and then I can go. But you got to make that choice. And it's harder and harder for people to want to learn to move on their own if they're so used to being guided, to being on guide rails, for their whole life, which is one of the reasons why I stress to my students learn how to astral project. It's fucking hard. But once you do it, you have this truly bird's eye view of everything. You have this dominion, you have this sense of true immortality. And there's a level of strength that comes from knowing if my body is obliterated, I remain. That full fleshed experience of no, 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 I did it. I was out of myself, provably. I did this, which is one of the reasons why, and it also makes you have a lot less respect or sympathy for skeptics. But the thing is, you have to look at it and go, do I rely upon that which is not me? And if so, for how long? Because I see a lot of people who could otherwise be quite good who stymie their own progress by going, well, my guides say whatever. I believe it was Jason Miller that said something like, he was baffled about how many people went into esoterica or magical practice in general who became more superstitious and more afraid and less full of agency than they were before. And I absolutely agree. You should be doing this to become a being of hyper agency. Now, again, this is where the moral question comes in. How good are you as a person? Are you the person who is truly to your core a kind individual who doesn't want to hurt anybody? I would argue if you are, there's like four of you, and one of them is Arden. And so there are three who remain, if any of you are watching this. But truly, but I'm not, right? I'm just gonna say that right now. I'm not. I am not an evil bastard necessarily, but I'm a realistic bastard. Like I'm here to be like your boss isn't your friend. But Alex, I have a cool boss. No, you don't. No, you don't. They're gonna fuck you sometime. Well, your landlord, not your friends. People like that. I'll always point this out. People that, oh yeah, fuck my landlord. When that person may not have actually done you wrong, but my boss, no, no, he's a cool boss. He's a good boss. If someone has power over you and you don't need to let them have power over you and they continue, that is a choice. And weakness is a choice. Frailty is a choice. Helplessness can be a choice. Because the thing you relinquish being magical is excuses. You do magic about it. I say that all the time on my Instagram. I will post the most unhinged anime memes of someone punching like through a wall, and it's like me showing up in your life to remind you that you can do magic about it. That's me.
That's true. As your friend, I can confirm this to the general public.
Every day in every way.
Sometimes, like the
Often.
Kool-Aid man, just Alex
That's
just
right.
burst through my wall, reminding me to do magic about it when I'm feeling particularly helpless.
Listen, I've been called everything but wrong. Is all I'm saying. Everything but a child of God and everything but wrong. Listen, but me, often imitated, never duplicated. All I'm here to say is if you become powerful, if you become solid in yourself, then mightn't you know your own highest good? Mightn't you be able to see it and name it and then have some wiggle room and go, yeah, but I want my car to be this color? Because at the end of the day, does it really matter what color the car is if it gets you to point A to point B? No, but does it make you happy? Yeah. And shouldn't you be a little bit happy? Shouldn't you be having some fucking fun? Shouldn't you be doing the stuff? Now that comes down to a question I'm actually curious about your take on. What if your highest good and Cynthia's highest good are the same finite resource? Who is gooder for the highest good of that one finite resource? Does it not, I would argue, come down to who is more powerful, who has a stronger connection to their spirits, who is more logistically capable? So in that case, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I think it does come down to that. But I think that for me, the source of so much of my power has been um, that as I have cultivated relationships with my spirits, and I understand this is not the source of everyone's power, but for me, the integrity that I've gone out of my way to give myself before overstepping and messing with any, other external affairs, taking care of
Mhm.
my internal programming first. And the fact that when I do come into power, I tend to use it for um, what the being of light in Tibetan Buddhism would refer to as like the spread of love and wisdom in the world. I love creating systems and like essentially giving spiritual how-tos, which is what the repatterning project is, and what my other course, Myths and Magic, is also about in a different way. And I love empowering people and I love creating more sustainability. I love teaching the balance of our own personal power and agency, and then our responsibility to the collective that we live in to use our power to fill our own cup. But then when our own cup is full, also to help the system that is around us because we don't exist in a vacuum. And so and especially in the past 2 years, as I've tackled and you've seen, like you've been right beside me, often advising me on how to tackle these challenges. But as I've tackled more and more complex challenges, my relationships with my spirits has grown stronger because I've proved myself. In fact, it was you actually who gave me a message from Hermes once that was basically you said you channeled Hermes and he had said She may call on me at any hour and any day. She has proved herself not just through the pact. For those of you guys who don't know, I have a pact with Hermes, the Greek god. You can find actually on my channel, I have a playlist called Deal with the Devil, which talks about all how I did that if you're interested. But I have a pact with Hermes for success in my career, in my music career, and also in like teaching and repatterning. Which are going to be, are going to be even more symbiotic, essentially. And and what you said was, yeah, it was not just through the pact, but by how she has fulfilled her commitments. And so for me, um, if I'm going against Cynthia, my strategy, first of all, I'm going to acknowledge that we do live in a world that is not always fair, and that if Cynthia is if Cynthia is a more powerful magician than I am, then she probably still is going to beat me somehow. But that means that like my goodness alone, my intention alone, my essentially my commitment to myself and my spirits in the greater universe, that the power I do get, I'm going to use in the ways that are aligned with my own personal genius to make the world around me a better place in whatever ways that I can without overextending myself, but by, staying in my lane and fulfilling the mission that I feel I have on the planet. That's going to strengthen my relationship with my spirits, but it's not necessarily going to help me body Cynthia, right? It's if Cynthia is competing with me for a scarce resource, she may simply have more personal power if she's trained more, and she may end up winning. However, if I train as hard as Cynthia, and I have relationships with spirits who say, we really want to see Arden win because we know that if Arden gets this thing, it's going to be better for everybody. Then I have a big advantage on Cynthia, and there is nothing, it is not going to compensate for where I have not trained because I'm going to be realistic like you are in that sense. I'm not going to come out and say, like, oh, well, I was the better person, so I should have had it, right? Like, because should and $5 will maybe get me a Starbucks. But I am going to say that honoring this commitment is going to be an advantage that is in a way separate from my training, or will enhance my training. So if my training and Cynthia's are equal, and I've got a whole bunch of spirits being like, no, yeah, we really want Arden to win because we know the stakes of this, then I'm going to have a bigger advantage over her, personally speaking.
Okay, and I can agree with that. Now, provided you do have better, because that's the thing. I mean, a person can have very negative mercenary relationships with spirits, and they'll get shit done too. A big conversation I have with a lot of more new agey people in the new thought community, and again, I love you guys to death because I'm one of the people who's over here like I got grimoire stuff, lion skin belt and all, baby. And I do all sorts of other magic, but I'm also like, no, new thought stuff works objectively. If you can't get it, you can't get it to work, you're not doing it right. But my conversations with them often default to me going, but people who do bad magic are more powerful than you, right? Like more viscerally, prime material world, aggressively powerful.
Well, that's
And
why
so
everyone needs a you.
I mean, well, no, no, well and truly, well and truly. But even then, I myself am a scarce resource. I mean, not everybody who, who's trying to book me can get me. Which again, very, very, very blessed and beneficial to say, high in demand. But
But wouldn't you say that if let's say I'm going up against Cynthia and it's really important and I know Cynthia is better than me, and if I call you up, wouldn't you say it's partly because I'm a good friend to you and I show up for you with integrity and you can trust me to keep my word and all those things? Don't you think that would be a big part of the reason why you might say, all right, Arden, I'm gonna help, come help you defeat Cynthia with
I,
whatever you
I,
need.
I would go to battle alongside you against the villain known as Cynthia. It's true, but you know, but the thing is, not everybody has that, one. And two, I don't know, it always kind of comes down to this interesting thing of utopianism in spirituality versus realism. And again, I'm not the person who's out there going, your realism should take the form of doing the most aggressive black magic possible all the time. There are people out there who do it, and I'm going to be real with you. They succeed. But much like being a drug dealer, fast money comes with slow problems. If you do, this is not, by the way, this isn't me speaking on some theosophical conceit around karma either. This is me just speaking logistically, which some pedant in the audience will be like, well, that might in itself be some sort of karma. Shut the fuck up. The point is, let's suppose you do all manner of dark magic to get the thing that you want. And you're like, fuck anyone's highest good. Mine, yours, Cynthia's even, everybody's, even Cynthia. Ain't no one like Cynthia anyway, but like fuck her double. But like, so we're over here, we're doing the blackest of the black magic, and you get the thing you want. And there are people out there right now. Once upon a time called right now, there are people out there who are doing this, have done this, will do this. I don't advocate that because it does eventually eat you a little bit. You know what I mean? Again, do I believe personally that there's some, karmic brotherhood watching you and acting as the astral police? Objectively, no, I don't. Um, but do I believe that you may end up suffering for these things? I have seen it more often than not. But I would also be remiss to say if there weren't a couple of people that I haven't seen pay a dime yet. So, all things being honest, but to that same end, their success is predicated outside of the specifically dark magic they do on being like, no, I want this. Because I would also argue the vague highest good is slower moving than the direct ask. And one would also argue um, that to tell a starving person to wait for their meal is untenable. They're not going to, which is why I often say, like, you can make some stupid mistakes with magic early on. Provided they work and you haven't caused too much damage, you can goof off a little bit. Again, provided you don't cause like abysmal, horrific damage. But if you like summon a job that you're like, yeah, it wasn't for me. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, even though you have to, you can go down the rabbit hole of analysis and like, oh, but that means somebody didn't get that job and I got that job. Yeah, that's life. You can summon a partner that maybe didn't work out. All right, well then
I
you
mean,
did
plenty of
that.
people do that in the mundane world anyway,
That's
so.
true. You can make these choices, and in that it's very similar. But I would say that building the confidence to know that you can do it, whether that comes in the form of using certain spirits or training your own spirit or doing anything in between, I always recommend both fields at once. You need to get to the point where you trust yourself enough, because that's another thing too that I find to be a kind of an uncomfortable reality. I have seen people enchant for their highest good and get something, and it's not enough because you have to look at that person and look at what they get. And from the outside looking in, you can even say as an objective observer, that fits them. That's about their capacity. But especially in today's world, saturated with social media illusions and all sorts of stuff, people are categorically unwilling to accept their personal capacities, and I'm one of them. Like I will say, I am not above that. But the difference is I try to bat above my weight by becoming stronger and better at all times. A lot of people want to bat above their weight because they just feel like they should. And again, magic can get you there temporarily, but if you can't hang, you can't hang. But who is going to swallow with pure humility? No, the thing you want, the thing you yearn for, the thing you yearn for that 10 years ago you wouldn't even know exists is beyond you. Because that's another thing I think people in metaphysics especially need to consider. 10 years ago, even, you didn't have the level of opulence on tap
That's
in
true.
the doom rectangle that you hold in your hand. Because now you can see things. And here's the thing: is it an illusion or is it better? Case in point, is having a marble island in your kitchen objectively better? Yes, or you wouldn't fucking want it. Even if you're a person who doesn't cook, would never use it for like, prep stations or whatever the fuck, you want it because it's nice. You ever use a rain shower head? That shit is a religious experience. That shit is nice.
No, it doesn't have enough pressure.
No, that shit was wonderful. I was in a jungle meditating under the rain in my own life. It was great. Point is, it's nice. Some things are just nice, but maybe they're not for you. And you got to, and swallow that. And again, as someone who's in the business of teaching people not to have to swallow that, I don't know that answer, but I do know that certain metaphysical technology, like putting things in the hands of the highest self, is insufficient to push you beyond your capacity. So if you are a person of excellent capacity, or you've taken Arden's training, or you've taken a number of different trainings, and that will elevate your capacity and your ability to know what to do, maybe you can rely on that and actually get what you want. Get something that you won't wake up 3 years later and go, fuck. Because that's the reality. That's the hard truth. Waking up and going, I tried. I tried so fucking, and I mean, and divination clients aplenty come to me and literally teary-eyed, being like, I know this is good, but I want so much more. What do I do? Not how do I get it even, but like what do I do? Am I wrong? Am I a bad person? Am I the problem? And the answer sometimes is yes, but sometimes is no. Sometimes it's like to get the thing you really want, you need to ask yourself a very difficult question. And that is, what happens even when you go to those spirits and you go, but I want this, and they say, no, that's not for you. You are not sufficient to the task. How do you respond? And again, I'm not white light goody two shoes guy. I'm not the worst out there, but I'm not the nicest either. I rest comfortably and firmly in the middle in reality, while being the guy who tells you that literal sorcery is miraculous and extremely real and always has been. And if you think it's not, you're an idiot. But what do you do? What does a person do when their highest good ain't that high and ain't
What?
that good?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. But what I've seen more of is a person who is trying to trying to get the things that they think that they want because they think it's going to fill that void. And I know that you and I have discussed like several case studies of this happening we've been familiar with where um a person, deals with their feelings of jealousy perhaps by using magic to cut another person down. Or there's someone who deals with their feelings of scarcity by using compulsory love magic. Or there's someone who, whatever it is, who is insisting on getting that thing that they want at all costs, but who isn't doing the work to instead either align with it internally or go deeper into saying like, well, why why did I want to break that dude's legs, just because he got the girl and I didn't or whatever? Is that actually going to solve my problem? So many of the things that we do, and this is why I teach repatterning, is that the thing that we're trying for is not the thing that is actually going to make us happy. And I think that's where highest good comes in, is that by especially by doing that magic on the self to align internally, we can then actually figure out the correct variables to put into the equation to get that thing that we want. And I personally have yet to come across a situation where now sometimes you come across a situation where you look at a person and you're like, you really haven't done the work. You just want the thing that you want right now, and you don't actually want to do what you would need to do to align internally with that, because you just want that thing and you think it's just like going to be a cure-all, just like your silver bullet fix it. And so you want that thing regardless of whether you've actually done the work to align with it or not. And uh and so I think, and they're inevitably gonna fumble that, like you've seen where that happens too. So I think again that doing that magic on the self and getting like that is what's gonna make that sustainable. And for a person who, like you said, you were talking about like it's cruel to tell a person who's starving to have to wait longer, and I get that. But for me, in my own path, I think back to like 2016, 2017, and it is going through that fire and learning to build from the ground up, even when I was in so much scarcity, even when I felt like I had no support, even when I felt like I was totally on my own. And I've told you this story, and I've told this story many times before. But there I was in 2016, in the months leading up to the first election where Trump, was elected president, and we were hearing, the whole radio like play of like the grab him by the pussy clip, over and over on like, and all about the stuff about sexual assault on TV and stuff like that. And here I was trying to repattern from toxic relationships with men. I was having to go out of my way to look for examples of men showing up in support of women in that freaking cesspool of a cultural climate. And that was lonely. I was starving that entire freaking time. And I'm not even saying that if I could go back, that I wouldn't have maybe like used more magic that I didn't know then that I know now to smooth out that process or make it easier. But that ability to build myself from the ground up, I think like that's what has made me in many ways a person who is capable of the extraordinary magic that I'm capable of today. Because I've been there, and I did it sustainably, and I didn't just try to self-soothe in the meantime, which doesn't mean that you can't use magic for self-soothing in the meantime, but I think you need to realize the difference between for example, I know folks out there who are in enormous, enormous scarcity, who are unhoused, who have been spiraling in many ways for years, but their strategy is just to constantly ask for donations, and just like, and then it's a hotel for the night, it's an Airbnb for the night, it's whatever, supplies that they needed or whatever. And I understand that need to give oneself that thing in the moment, but there's never any sustainable exit plan. And it's just it's so sad to be in that place where you can't see a way out other than just constantly needing that thing, and needing, we need more to survive, we need more to, we need more for comfort or whatever. And there's no greater campaign or greater strategy around it. And I think magically that can kind of become the equivalent sometimes. If someone is starving and they learn, oh, I do this and I can feed myself, they may not, sure, do that, but then don't skip also on the building as well. Otherwise, you're just going to be plugging the hole and plugging the hole, and you're never going to actually get anywhere.
So I agree with you there, which is again why I always advocate the growth of a person in their own personal training, and learning who they are and developing cultivation, all that good stuff. But I still feel as though the elephant in the room about this, and I said this already, but I will reiterate, the elephant in the room about this is always personal capacity vis-a-vis the world we currently live in. And I've seen people do their very best, occultists and everything, do their very best to have the clean win and to hit every metric. I mean, they're self-improving, they got their money up, they're doing everything, and they're doing a lot of magic, and they still find themselves short of the mark. And again, as someone who educates people on magic, I find that to be disturbing, because that flies in the face of my lived experience. Again, being candid, none of my students are like this exactly, but I've seen some of them struggle more than mathematically they should have, like doing the right magic, getting the right things, but the world is different.
It is, yeah.
The world is harder. And in this way, I do think the MMAification, if you will, of magic is crucial, because I see people doing now what chaos magicians in the 90s pretended they were doing by actually adding magic as tech and things that actually work, rather than thinking they were cleverer than magic and thinking that things were in code and thinking that miracles weren't really real, which again, all disrespect to them for that. Like anyone in the 90s who was like, oh, it's actually this grimoire's written in code. I'm like, yes, this 16-page book on fucking vellum was written in code. Shut the fuck up. Like, no, it's literal. Don't be dumb. But like, we're seeing that, and we're seeing people benefit from it. We're seeing people break through, and in cleaner ways than expected. It's not, even though you are seeing the rise of compulsory love spell and scarcity driven aggressive magic, and petty curses on the internet. Like, I guarantee you someone will try to curse both Arden and I because of this video, because we had opinions on the internet, you know,
Not a
and
smart thing to do, just FYI.
I think you should try it. I'm so vulnerable and delicate. You'll absolutely get in. You'll absolutely hurt me. I'm so scared of you. So scared. It's don't look, I'm trembling, really. But no, try it. No, please do it. But but that aside, I do have to look though at the concept as tech, as is it tech that works? And my, I guess, final point is it works if and only if you are at a certain level. Sort of like manifestation tech works if and only if you reach a certain point. That being either a certain point of personal development or a certain point of training based development, or ideally both. But, you know, you have to get to the point where you can do it. And also, I think that perhaps an olive branch middle ground, if I were to say, all right, let's suppose they're both right.
Which we
No,
probably are, but this
you know,
has been a fun argument anyway.
naming the shape of a thing as a vessel and having a highest good liquid poured into it is perhaps the middle ground. Again, if there's something you want, the color of the car, it'd be nice, you know, make my partner beautiful because why the fuck not? It also never hurts to ask. Like, this is the thing I tell people too. Like, you should probably be unhinged about your petitions sometimes because even if you're only going to get 80% of my very best ask is still better than 80% of my most realistic ask. But also understand that you may get almost everything, and then you got to juggle that, which is why personal
True.
development, learning yourself is very important. That said, one other thing I kind of want to ask is in a growing world of aggression, how does one protect one's highest good from those who would steal it? Because that is a real thing that really does happen. Someone could steal your stars, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Well, and that has happened to me in the past, it was but it wasn't permanent, you know? And in the end, I was the best candidate for all the reasons that I mentioned. And I look at that time now as like, um, you know, just a time of conflict on my own hero's journey, you know, that I'm
Hmm.
like, that was not the end of the story. That was actually in many ways like the sort of plot twist or character development that like, oh, this other person played dirty to get this, right? But actually, I'm going to stay the course. I'm going to work hard and I'm going to do this the real and sustainable way. And even though like this is stuff that is going to be revealed more like over the course of 2025 for any of you who are watching, because I'm not going to lie, I haven't put out a lot of new stuff lately because I've been working on so much stuff that is about to hopefully be birthed into the world. But yeah, it wasn't the end because ultimately that is the thing that was meant for me. And a person who's going out like, you know, backstabbing or riding on other people's coattails or lying to get where they are, like, man, do you know how easy it is to topple someone like that magically? And you know, for the longest time, like I didn't touch anyone other than me because I was like, nope. I believe in myself and I believe in like, you know, in me, you know, just being the better person for the job ultimately. And then there was a time where spirit basically came along and was like, no, it is actually within your integrity now to defend this certain territory. This is stuff that you have commitments to defending, and so if a person steps up to that, you are well within your right, you know, to protect that and to bounce them back from that. And I did, you know, and in the end, that is what helped me to become victorious. And I actually think in some ways that my spirits orchestrated that transgression so that I could defeat that enemy because they kind of knew that I wasn't going to touch them without that, I think in some ways. So I don't know. I would just say it's not if it's not the end, it's not the end. But here's one final question to end on, I think,
Hmm.
is I do think that we're both right. And I think that, yeah, I think there's the best thing is always going to be a mix of the two, right? Even I started out in the beginning with an intention of I want to be a successful musical artist
Hmm.
for my, you know, who I am in the world with relation to my art. I want to be also a successful spiritual coach and course creator so that I can financially support myself while I'm pursuing my music. And I want a true love relationship. This is something that is very important to me. And basically, starting with those three intentions, I'm basically saying this is the thing that I want for myself. Um, and having the rest of it kind of fill in, and those things kind of being in my highest good anyway. I think like it's even as I was making those intentions, I think they were almost so, I think I'd already kind of started aligning with my highest good. I would say even my highest good magic might have helped me with the clarity on setting those intentions. But I would say, yeah, we're both right in that it's best to use a sort of blend of the two. You want to know something about what you want your life to look like instead of, just completely putting it in the hands of a spirit or of another deciding factor. But what would you say? What do you think is the correct way to blend those two? So for any spell or any petition you're doing, obviously you're going to have to put some intention into it. You could just say, align me with my highest good, but assuming if that's a 0%,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what yours is like you give me everything that I want and nothing deviates from it whatsoever. Where do you think is the sweet spot? And that'll be our wrap up question.
So again, I hate that this is going to be the immediate answer. It depends on who you are and
I
what you want and where you're going. If
know.
it's me, I'm looking at like 75% give me the what the fuck I want. That's just me, Mr. Vegas, you know. But I will say the way that it takes the form for me is there are a small number of genuine patron spirits who have proven themselves like dedicated to me and my goals and me throughout possibly many lifetimes and all sorts of good stuff like that. Again, like years in the vetting, by the way, and mentors that I learned from who I trusted not only tell me the truth, but hold my nose to the grindstone and be like, that was fucking foolish. Because I mean, again, the best mentors you're going to get are the ones who are going to tell you the truth, not the ones who are going to hold your hand and spoon feed you. Like a good mentor is someone who you sometimes fucking hate. You know what I mean? You sometimes are like, oh, like, they're the ones. And so occasionally, if it's something big, I will run it past one of the people who currently teaches me and be like, what do you think about this? And that itself is a vetting process. And I'll go through a certain, and also even then doing divination. Be good at divination, by the way. Always be good. And be like, what happens if I do this? Or can I get what I want? Or, all right, show, because sometimes you, again, ask and you will get an answer. Be like, what do you think my highest good looks like? Because like for example, and then this is very different than going to your friends like, what do you think I should do? Maybe your friends are going to know, maybe they won't. And if they're honest friends and they have no connection to the question, like I don't fucking know. But I mean, if you go to various spirits that you trust, key thing, patron spirits that are benevolent to you, and you're like, okay, or like again, like higher masters or whatever form that takes for you as a person. You're like, okay, what do I do? And again, expect some funny answers that sometimes things that seem to mean a lot to you don't really matter. Like certain things don't have a highest good, and you might think they do, but certain things that you might think that they don't really do. Case in point, let's say you produce educational context for Magick. That has a lot of overarching ripple effects because you're essentially, at worst, a metaphysical arms dealer, and at best, someone who can save lives. And
And
so,
it really yeah, it really
yeah,
can go that far either way. Ooh.
it absolutely can. And so, being like, whose good is this class for example, you know, uh, who does this benefit and who could this possibly hurt and blah blah blah. Those are things I suppose you could ask. But also, you may get some very vexing answers for a modernly minded person in 2025 from spirits or even mentors who are considerably older than you. Always keep in mind generational differences may not necessarily be wrong. They might, but they might not. This is why you have to have discernment no matter what. And I think at the end of the day, you should use your own discernment, as vague as that sounds, to figure this out. But also, how much do you know about the subject matter? How much do you know about what you're doing? Like if you know an industry inside and out and you know what move you need to make, that could be 100% give me the thing. If you're like, the broader the picture goes, I suppose, the more you can put that in the hands of things that can see and reach farther than you, provided that you go, this is my North Star. This is what I want, good, bad, and indifferent. And that's important. Anything around that is cool, but I want those things. And also be prepared for sometimes spiritual forces to go, you are insufficient to the task because of X, Y, and Z. You need to become this thing. Because some of them will be like, all right, we'll do it. But if we bring it to you and you can't handle it, that's your fault. And so I think that even before you look at the ratio, figure out if you can do it as best you can. And if you look at the ratio, figure out how vague or how concrete the goal is and what you're gonna really want out of it and how much you can parse from it. And again, and when in doubt, divine or get someone to do it for you. Ask the questions, don't be shy. Better to ask a dumb question and get a good answer than not to know and fuck yourself over. But in general, what I think that could like fundamentally look like in practice is like, let's say you're like, all right, I want my dream career as a social media influencer who specializes in tying shoes. I'm the best shoe tyer who ever lived, and I'm great. And let's suppose you really are like you could do like you could tie both of them at the same time with one hand each in like 0.5 seconds, like whatever. And you don't understand how to market yourself on social media or how to do anything, and you're like 25%, here's my spell, here's my goal, and the rest of it is like guide me along this path. And then all of a sudden, you trip over marketing classes and a personal stylist who becomes your friend who tells you the truth about like, homie, you need to lose 25 pounds, or whatever. And then you move on to that and you have this serendipitous series of events that gently with hero's journey development guides you along where you go. Okay, cool. But let's say, and again, you put the spell together. You get your candles, you get your petitions, you get your spirits, you get whatever way you do it, and you say, "This is what I want. This is my boundary. I do not want this. I don't want anything but this. I want this." Because you can say like, I don't want, because again, like what if it's like, oh, because I see this all the time. Oh, I did a spell and I really wanted this, but I got this other thing. And I'm like, that isn't in the same ballpark at all. That's not the same thing. Your spell either failed or that spirit did you dirty, if you ask me. And it was like, no, no, you got to handle this. And again, it's a tough thing because sometimes you look at that person and you're like, actually, if I was that spirit, I'd have put you there too, because you are ill-equipped for what you wanted. And in some cases, you look at them and you're like, there was no way. It was never going to be you. And that's a hard thing. I think just for a bit, each one of us eventually runs across something in life where it was like, it wasn't going to be you. That is a character development thing that everybody needs. And those who have yet to have it, it's coming. And I hope you can handle it because it hurts when you're like, I really, really, in the worst way, I want this, you know? And then you get hit with the like, you're not built for this. It ain't you. You're not the one. Even if it's something you love. And that's a thing. So I think a lot of it is like personal humility to figure out what the ratio is and what you can handle. Because like, and I'll give a personal example. I am a guitarist as a hobby. It is not in me to be a touring musician or a studio guy. Tried it. Could not hang. Used magic to get closer than I should have. Way closer, way faster. And it worked. All for me to get fucking axed immediately. So again, it can happen. And that, believe me, that hurt my pride. And I still practice every day, still love music, still play with other people. But, unlike Arden, who is built for this shit, I'm a good guitar player, man. I love that shit, but it's not me in that same way. Like I'm not built to be a touring musician and do all this stuff and to even do that. So, and it doesn't mean that, you can't, in my case, write music for fun. And again, it doesn't mean you can't be good at it either. It doesn't mean you can't like play with bands and do that stuff, but there's a temperament and a constitution that comes along with like, is this really the hustle you want? Is this the thing that you're willing to devote crazy amount of time to? So, you may reach that. You may be humbled by the universe in a not even a highest good kind of way, but like a, you should have fucking known. You should have fucking known. And I should have known. I put myself on that cross all the time. I should have known. And I did not. But, you know, so like I said, I think that's that is a way you can find what the ratio might be. Now, again, if you're me, and nobody can be me but me, uh, you're gonna more be like, I know what the fuck's good for me. I know what I want. And I, knock on wood, I've yet to be humbled too many more times. It being wrong as fuck. But I also admit that the part of the responsibility of driving the car is, accepting that you're driving the fucking car. Like it's up to you now. And there are times when I will default to familiar spirits or aids or other things like that to to help me see it through, but everything to its degree. That's my
Yeah.
answer.
Nice. I think my answer is like a gradient one. I think my recommendation again is start out really broad and work on work on your internal patterning. Work on noticing in your life where you are doing something, attempting to get a result that you are not getting, and examine the variable that you are putting into that pattern and what you might do instead that will actually bring you closer to that result, and leave it open in the beginning. And then when you've gotten more of your sea legs and you've also used um, your integrity and your willingness to repattern yourself to be a match to that which you want, and you've developed also relationships with your spirits who now know that you are good at keeping your commitments, et cetera, et cetera. And you have the divination skills to, as Alex mentioned, to check in with those spirits and ask, well, what will happen if I do this? What will happen if I do this, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's when you get to the point where you have kind of earned your stripes and you can have more mastery in moving chess pieces around the board. So you're not just moving all these chess pieces expecting your own happiness level to change when what needs to change is your own internal self. But rather when you know that you're like, no, I'm good. I know what's me and what's not me. I've dealt with everything internally that could possibly be a factor in this situation. So now that I know that if I do need to move some chess pieces around, yeah, I'm going to give myself permission to do that. I'm going to ask my spirits. I'm going to make sure that there's not going to be any negative consequences for me. But now I know that I have now stepped into the level of responsibility and accountability that I know I need in order to take responsibility for moving those pieces about and what results I get, et cetera. So I'm not just coming to you and being like, oh no, I think I cursed someone and it worked because I didn't like that they got the thing and I didn't. Now what do I do?
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, thank you again for having this chat with me. I think we should probably wrap up, or else the video will be so long that nobody will watch it. But
That's true.
but
That's
tell
true.
tell folks also, like, well, I'll just put it out there again once again, you guys. The repatterning project Winter 2025 begins on February 2nd. You can reach out to me. You can look, I'm sure, in the description box where I'll probably leave stuff about it, or you can just go to therepatterningproject.com to find out more information. And also, you can listen to my band, Arden and the Wolves, if you're into amazing magical music from someone who quite literally sings to change her reality. And Alex, where can people find more from you and what you offer?
So there's practicaloccult.com. You want amulets? My coworker Allison makes the best in business. Shit actually works. We got a bunch of reviews of people being like, these magical pieces of metal actually do stuff. You will not regret it. As far as my stuff, though, practicaloccult.com as well. You want readings? I got readings. You want classes? I got classes. You want one-on-one mentorship to become the most magical version of yourself and actually have the life that you desire? I got you on that too. Again, you pay you pay for the good shit, you get the good shit, and I will absolutely deliver.
Man, how powerful would someone be if they studied with both of us? We could be the angel and the devil on their shoulders together.
We in fact would be, but honestly, if you were gonna do both, you should probably do Arden's thing first because it will make you become a stronger version of yourself, and it's not going to be easy, and it will require a great deal of work on your part. Like none of this stuff is easy, and then you come to me fully fleshed out, and we can work it out. If then you were going to do both. But again, it's up to you, whatever you want to do. I will say though, if you've never taken a magical class of any kind, my Protection 101 through 103 series is probably the thing you need the very most in the world right now. Keep you safe, keep you strong, keep you good. 'Cause if your
Protection and
defense is
money magic. Holy shit, both of
yeah,
those.
yeah, yeah. If you need both, if you have good protection, your life is just straight up easier. Because I teach you not just how to protect yourself from evil magic, but bad luck, misfortune, disease, and all manner of things. Everything bad, I teach you how to keep it at bay. So, invest in yourself really, and make your life better.
Which that is a great note to end on. That has been the theme for today is in whatever way you choose to do it, whether you choose to get hyper specific or whether you choose to leave your highest goods up to the spirits that you work with, invest in yourself and make your life better. Thank you everyone for watching. And I'm sure I'll have Alex back again soon because he can't get rid of me even if he wants to. Bye.